Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel a good couple of times before. I've been very impressed with the beers that I've had from these guys so far. They're a very new addition to the Scottish beer scene, mainly focusing on kind of sessionable beers, but the one we're going to have a look at today is my first experience of a darker beer from them, and it also is quite a bit higher in ABV than the beers you would normally find from them as well. So for this review then we are going to head through to Edinburgh once again, to Leith to be specific, and we're going to have a look at my fourth beer from Newbarns Brewery. So this particular beer is called the Plain Dark Beer. It comes in at 11% ABV, an Imperial Stout, although they are describing it as a strong export stout. But yeah, I'm really curious to see what this beer has in store for us. The other beers that I've had from this brewery thus far would be the Pale Ale, Citra and Equinaut. Then I had the Oat Lager, which was really nice, quite a quirky beer that one actually, and then I reviewed the Pilsner, which the video got a little bit messed up for, but I think it still worked out quite nicely because we had the original tasting in there. But yeah, as I say, this brewery seemed to focus on more sessionable beers. They've got a hell of a pedigree behind them as well, so this will be the first dark beer that I'm trying from them, and it's quite a bit stronger than the others as well. So fingers crossed it makes for a good beer. I have heard good things about this one, so I'm certainly looking forward to trying, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, let's get on with this review then and see how we go. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Newbarns Brewery before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Scottish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite a bit at the moment because I am enjoying a little bit of time at home in the motherland of Scotland and trying a lot of different Scottish beers, which is always good. But there's all the usual things down there. As always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Newbarns Brewery then, on to my brewery notes. So as I've told you before, Newbarns Brewing, or Newbarns Brewery, however you want to call them, were founded in 2020 and they're based in Leith in Edinburgh, kind of to the east of the main central part of the city. But the four friends behind this brewery are Emma McIntosh, Gordon Mackenzie, Johnny Hamilton and Freddie Bjerkseth. So Gordon and Emma are a couple and they moved down to London from the east coast of Scotland back in 2012. When they went down there they hadn't really planned to become brewers, but Gordon soon started working at Siren Brewery just after they started up in 2013, while Emma started working at Kernel in early 2014. So two very good breweries to get a bit of experience with, let's just say that. But they met Freddie in 2012 just before he began working at Beavertown. He was a sales account manager there, and then Johnny also worked at Beavertown as well, and he was in charge of their Tempest barrel aging project, which produced some very impressive beers in its day. But Gordon later went on to work at the Kernel Brewery as well, joining Emma there, and so as you can see the four guys behind this brewery really have a very strong pedigree within the London craft beer scene. But in 2018, after a few years down there, Gordon and Emma decided it was time to return to Scotland, and they'd always wanted to start up their own brewery, and by the following year Freddie and Johnny had joined them in Edinburgh, and then it was time for them to get started properly on Newbarns Brewery. But the branding that these guys use is inspired by a bunch of old beer mats that date from between the 1940s and the 1980s, and these were found by Emma's dad at an auction somewhere, and all four of them really liked it, and so decided to use this as the kind of branding for the brewery. And the focus of this brewery is essentially going to be sessionable beers, so like pale ales, you know, low alcohol stouts, pilsners, and things like this, different lager beers. So yeah, basically kind of taking the idea of the Kernel and bringing it up to Edinburgh, which is pretty cool actually. But they've done quite a few different beers so far. As of January 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 15 different kinds of beer. This is the fourth one I'm reviewing for you on the channel, as I've mentioned, but all of the beers I've had from them I have been quite impressed with. They do say that they're going to open up a tap room at the brewery as well, so maybe once this whole COVID-19 thing buggers off I can get through to Edinburgh and do a little bit of out and about filming there. I've not done too much in the way of out and about filming in Scotland so far, So I will see about doing that once this whole situation kind of clears up. I would like to go and film a little bit of an out and about video in Aberdeen actually. I'd love to go and show you guys the places that I used to go and frequent, if you like. So yeah, it would be quite cool to do that. Do the original Brewdog bar and stuff, and then a few places in Edinburgh, Stout Brewing, Campervan Brewery, and then Newbarns Brewery if they have a place as well. Brauhaus in Edinburgh and the Hanging Bat are definitely worth hitting up as well. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Newbarns Brewery for the moment. It's quite nice to be able to review a couple of their beers in the very early stages of their history, and I look forward to seeing what these guys are going to do over the next little while, and hopefully at some stage we can get the 4 founders, or a couple of them at least, on the channel to do a Meet the Brewery segment. I think that could be very, very interesting. But yeah, as I say, that's all I can tell you just now. If you want to learn more about this brewery, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. You can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that they've done, and yeah, just go and have a look at that. But you can get these beers in quite a few different places. You can buy them from various shops across Scotland, and you can also get them in places like the House of Trembling Madness down in York in England, which is probably the best online beer shop you'll get down there. But yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. So as I mentioned to you, this is my 4th beer that I'm having from these guys after the Citron Equinox Pale Ale, the Oat Lager, and the Pilsner. But this one comes in 11% ABV, strong export stout. Basically a big Imperial stout, this one, and there you can see the artwork on this one is a little bit different, and it gives you the address of the brewery down there, Newbarns Brewery, 13 Jane Street, Edinburgh. But yeah, there's the Newbarns text, which you'll find on all of the cans, but like I say, slightly different artwork, and this symbol here that's got the gold kind of trim around it, that is the Newbarns Brewery symbol. Just let you focus on that a minute. But yeah, 440ml can, this one. I actually can't remember what I paid for this, but this was a little bit more expensive, maybe £7-8 or something like that. It was just a wee bit more pricey, but as I say, it's quite a special beer. I don't think this one will be around for all that much longer, so I just kind of thought, you know, bugger it, let's try something from the dark end of the spectrum. But this one was canned on the 17th of November 2020, so I'm drinking it when it's about 2 months old, and they say that it's best before the 17th of November 2030, so you could age this for 10 years. It's interesting, I've been saying this in a few videos recently, that quite a few breweries are recommending only a 2-year tenure in the can, so I wonder why this one's a little bit different. I always thought it was because the seal on the can maybe wasn't quite as strong as you know, a bottle seal with a wax top on it. So that's an interesting point about this particular beer. So yeah, trying not to sneeze, so getting a bit sniffle. There we go. But yeah, 11% Imperial Stout, this one, 440ml can. I think this beer cost about £7 or something like that, so that translates to roughly €8, maybe $9 American, maybe about 80 Swedish kroners for those of you watching over there. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. 11% Imperial Stout, the plain dark beer from Newbarns Brewery through in Edinburgh, specialising in some very nice sessionable beers. But yeah, look at that. That's crazy. That is crazy. But I'd love to see these guys do, you know, a Scotch ale as well. A German Dunkel would be quite nice. If they did like an 80 shilling, since they're based in Edinburgh, I think that would be pretty cool. But yeah, let's get this guy out and into the glass. There we go. I think my nose is clear now. Hopefully I'm not sniffing too much in this video. But yeah, there we go. So as you can see, and as you would expect from a big Imperial Stout, this beer has poured a lovely kind of very dark ebony type colour. This is pretty much oil black, inky black. I think I was reading that was from Burnt Mill actually, when I had the Mikkeller Burnt Mill collaboration. They described it as inky black, and that was very fitting. But yeah, this beer is, you know, black as night basically. It's as black as you're going to get. But yeah, you can see this beer poured with about a half finger of a frothy, I would say quite dark tan head, but not the darkest of tan that I've come across. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there. But I mean, overall, it does look pretty damn nice actually. It looks kind of how you would expect for a big Imperial Stout. Nothing overly surprising about this beer. As you can see, if I put my fingers behind the glass, it is pretty damn dark actually. The ingredients on this one, incidentally, are just water, hops, yeast and barley malt. So this one doesn't have wheat or oats or anything like that in it. So this one looks as if it will be a properly old school stout, and I was kind of guessing that by the branding, so this one probably will be like a very, very old school Imperial Stout, maybe a Russian Imperial Stout or whatever. But yeah, it certainly looks the part for an Imperial Stout regardless, and I'm very, very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. So yeah, interesting stuff, interesting stuff. So yeah, let's have a little look at the aroma then and see how we get on with this one. We'll sugar it up a little bit. Yeah, so straight away with this beer, it is pretty damn old school. So I mean, with this one, you can really smell the lovely kind of big brown bready base that it has. There is a little bit of a toasty, well-fired bread malt in there, but I don't find that to be too prominent. It's mainly a kind of smooth, sort of wholemeal, slightly rye bready type quality you get out of this one. So it's big. It is like a very just old. It's almost like a kind of English traditional stout in a way, but you can smell that it's a little bit kind of bigger and boozy, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, definitely lovely kind of big bready base to the beer. I would say, what would I say about this one? I would say, yeah, lovely big kind of brown bready base. There is a little bit of a kind of bread crusty quality in there. You can smell a little bit of the roasty, toasty black malts out of this beer, but I think the breadiness really kind of smooths it out quite nicely, to be honest. There is a little bit of brown sugar to this one, and it's quite a toasty brown sugar. You do get an element of sweet caramel out of this beer, but yeah, there's quite a bit of kind of toasty brown sugar. You've got a good little bit of kind of chocolate in this one as well. I would say like a 60 or 70% cocoa chocolate coming out of this beer. So yeah, the kind of, how do you say, the sort of the aroma that comes out of this beer is very old school. It is like a proper kind of Russian Imperial Stout, this one. It doesn't smell madly roasty, but the more that you smell of it, I think it does gradually build up a little bit of roastiness. So yeah, roasty black malt backbone, some nice kind of brown bready, kind of rye bready type qualities, bit of bread crust in there, sweet caramel, you know, definitely a good little bit of sweet caramel there, some toasty brown sugars as well though, a little bit of McVitie's digestive biscuit, absolutely, and then it's difficult to place the chocolate though. There is a wee bit of a chocolatey element to this one. You know, maybe about, I think, 60% cocoa roughly. It has got a wee bit of a dark chocolatey note to it, but at the same time there is something a little bit lighter in there too. But there's one or two little woody undertones to the beer, a few little nutty elements as well. You know, these typical kind of undertones that you're going to get from a big beer like this. Yeah, but I would say it kind of comes across as quite a soft stout, not overly dry, just very, very smooth actually. That's the main impression that I get from this one, is that it's just a very kind of big and smooth stout. I think that covers the malty side of it quite well, to be honest with you. So yeah, lovely. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, there's a good little bit. There's a good little bit of earthiness to this one, but again, it's not overly prominent. So a nice little bit of smooth earthiness, a little bit of a herbal quality, and you've also got a nice wee bit of a slight floral aromaticity to this one as well. I do wonder if it's English hops that's in this, because there is just that little element of you know, of herbal quality to this beer. A little bit of lighter grassiness as well. There's a wee touch of zestiness, which is great. And, you know, yeah, it's got a lovely, it really has a very lovely, it's just, yeah, it's got a lovely fruitiness to it as well. So on the fruity side of things, you've got a little bit of, you do get quite a little bit of a kind of rich plummy element to this one. There's maybe a wee almost tiny touch of cherry or something like that. It does have a wee bit of that kind of stronger cherryish note to it. Wee bit of raisin sharpness as well, some juicy figs, but for me the fruits are quite oily, so it's the plums and the cherries and the blackberries that are coming out of this one. There is a little bit of that lighter juicy kind of blackcurranty vibe to the beer, but mainly the fruits for me come across as being quite oily. But yeah, the aroma of this beer I think is very, very nice. I can still smell it through my nose even though it's running. It's quite annoying actually how my nose, I sneeze just before the video, then my nose just starts kind of running as I've gotten started on it. But yeah, the aroma of this beer, as I say, quite a big oily fruity stout, lots of lovely kind of smoothness in there. Yeah, lots of lovely kind of smooth elements to it as well. And not overly kind of roasty and toasty. Yeah, big oily and juicy and fruity. Smooth malt base, a little bit of sweetness to it as well, a little bit of toastiness, and then just a little bit of hoppy character as well. But the aroma of this beer is absolutely beautiful, so I'm very curious to see how it turns out. But let's have a go at this one then. and see how we get on. So this is the plain dark beer, an 11% Imperial Stout from Newbarns Brewery, based in Leith through in Edinburgh. I think this is going to be the biggest beer that I've had from them so far, and it is very highly rated too. So let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. My last Newbarns Brewery beer that you'll probably see for a little while, until September I guess. Cheers. Let's get stuck in. Yep, that's a big, oily beast of an Imperial Stout. Absolutely. And it is very old school as well. Straight up barley malt. None of this wheaty, none of this oaty smoothness, not even oatmeal out of it. This is lovely. This is very, very nice. It does remind you of a few of the kind of, you know, the 1856 export Imperial Stout and things that you had from Kernel and stuff. Actually, it is very, very similar to that, come to think of it. But it's a beautifully done beer, so thumbs up to them for this. If you like these big Kernel Imperial Stouts, this one is very much like that. This is a very old school Imperial Stout, but I doubt back in the day you would have seen many of these beers at 11%. I think this is, you know, a big kind of modern take on these old school Imperial Stouts. Absolutely. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would wonder if many of these big Imperial Stouts would go above 8%, 8.5%, something like that. I would think that would probably be the kind of limit of brewing a lot of these beers back in the day. But this is a lovely, lovely beer, and it gets a massive thumbs up from me. As I say, the other beers that these guys do are, you know, mainly sessionable beers, just very kind of drinkable ones. But it's quite cool that they show you so early on in their history that they can do something like this. So on this basis, I would love to see these guys, you know, have a go at a big Scotch ale or something like this, you know, a big 160 shilling beer. That would be an awesome little project for them to have a go at. A Doppelbock as well would be great if they're going to try some of the lager beers. A Belgian quadruple, you know, do things like this. Have a very strong series, you know, have a strong series, the high ABV series, and try, you know, tripels and quadruples and things like this, because they very obviously know what they're doing with these kind of beers. But yeah, I like this one. This is like a properly old school, but you know, a lot stronger Imperial Stout. So thumbs up to Newbarns for this awesome, awesome beer. And I've enjoyed all of them so far, but I think in terms of, you know, a beer that strikes you, this one probably is the kind of standout so far. The other beers, as I say, the Pale Ale was really well executed, the Oat Lager was really quirky, and I think the Pilsner was solidly done, but I think this one is the one that just really stands out for its quality. Probably just because it is the one that's kind of unusual compared to the rest of their range, so bear that in mind. But yeah, very, very nicely done. So big thumbs up to the guys at Newbarns for this. It's an awesome, awesome beer. Let's try and break down the flavour of this one then and just see how we get on. So straight away with this beer, you can feel a nice kind of, you know, well-fired bread crusty quality. That blankets the middle of your palate. So let's just talk about that middle third of your palate just now. So you've got that slightly well-fired brown, you know, bread crusty quality just sitting there. On top of that, you get a nice kind of solid wholemealy type brown bread kind of quality in there, and again that just sits there really nicely. But the malt base in this beer really is quite bready. If you go towards the back of that middle third of your palate, there's a nice kind of bread crusty element there, which I think is really nice. You get a little bit of that more kind of grainy. I think it's right to say it's a bit more grainy if you like. But then if you go towards the back of the palate, again you get a good little bit of bready base to the beer, but it just feels a little bit thicker. So I guess the yeast is kind of just thickening up the sort of bready elements to the beer on the back third of your palate. But if you go way, way back to the very kind of back, the very extremities of the back of your palate, you've got a little bit of a kind of well-fired, you do get a little bit of the kind of roasty black malty qualities out of this one. I do wonder if this has got a little bit of, you know, German Carafa or something in it. It could well be Special B if you like, but I don't think it's black malt. It doesn't come across as quite harsh enough, if you like, to be black malt or roasted barley. So I do wonder if there is a little bit of Carafa in this, to be honest with you. Something familiar about this. But yeah, it is. In terms of its flavour profile, It does have a good little bit of depth to it, absolutely. And I think the more that you drink of this, it does get us a little touch drier. I mean, if you go to the front corners of your palate and then go diagonally back, you will notice that there's a few drier, woody undertones coming out of the beer the further that you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, in the middle of your palate, you will notice that it does sweeten up a little bit. So on top of that kind of brown bready note, you do have a good little bit of chocolate coming out of this one, maybe a 70 or 80% cocoa chocolate. And that does, as I say, kind of just sit there the further you go into the aftertaste. But it does dry out and become a little bit more kind of chocolate powdery the further that you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, in that very centre of your palate, you've got a nice kind of big oily, you do have a nice big kind of oily brown sugary note coming out of this one. As I say, it's like it is a little bit like a kind of treacle molasses sort of thing. And probably what's happened with this, it will have some kind of thing, but this beer is extremely dark. And remember, the colour of your beer is dependent on two things: one, the type of malts you use; two, the length of boil that you use. The longer that you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus they get a little bit darker and more oily. So there's quite a little bit of that coming out of this one. You can smell that the brown sugars are very oily in it. You can smell that straight away, but you can also taste it as well. You've got that big treacly molasses sort of thing sitting there in the very centre of your palate. But as you move out from the centre of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more sort of caramelly. So yeah, it's a little bit more, as I say, kind of sweeter and caramelly as you move further out from the centre of your palate. As you reach the kind of edges of that middle third of your palate, you will get a few little McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of things, but you can feel the chocolatey notes that you have in this beer almost just kind of dries out a little bit. So it does become a little bit more kind of chocolatey and powdery, if you like, and you can feel a little bit, there is a wee bit of more, the kind of well-fired bread crusty elements, they sort of push their way out of the beer a little bit more the further you go into the aftertaste as well. So I really like how everything goes together, and I really like how everything goes together in this in the middle of your palate here. It's quite a straight shooting Imperial Stout in some ways. It's not the most madly complex of things that you're going to come across, but it's really nicely layered and it has everything that you would want. But if you go to the centre of your palate, as I say, and then move forward, you do get a little bit more of a kind of nutty quality out of the beer. You get a nice little nutty quality towards the front of that middle third of your palate. So I do appreciate that about this beer for sure. But yeah, it's everything in the malty side of this beer is really nicely executed. It does dry out a little bit the further you go into the flavour, but in the beginning it's very smooth and almost quite silky in a lot of ways actually. So big thumbs up to Newbarns Brewery for this one actually. Everything works out really nicely. So yeah, in terms of the, how would we say, in terms of the hoppy side of things then, so in the back corners of the palate you've got a nice little bit of roasty earthiness there. I do think there's maybe I've got a feeling there might be an American hop in this, to be honest with you, like Magnum or something like this. The hops just strike me as being a little bit, I think there might be an American hop in here along with an English one, so maybe there's a little bit of an English hop along with like Fugel. I do get the impression of Fugels in this beer. So in the back corners of your palate there's a good little bit of a strong earthiness there, but as you move further forward from that you start to get a little bit of earthiness to the beer, and that kind of earthy, ashy, I should say ashy, not earthiness, so you do get a little bit of ashiness in that back corners of your palate, and that's Fugel. That is Fugel hop from England all the way. So you can feel the earthiness just kind of spreading forward actually, and as you reach the kind of front corners of your palate, it does the ashiness comes quite far forward, but then on the front corners of your palate it's really nice and sort of floral and aromatic. So I really like how this beer goes together in that sense, absolutely. Yeah, it's a really interesting hoppy part of the beer. I've not had Fugels in a beer in quite a long time, but it's really distinctive for that big earthiness actually. But round the front curve of the palate, distinctly lighter and more grassy. There's a wee touch of zestiness to it, but remember, as you age a beer like this, those green components of the hops are going to draw away a little bit. But again, it's quite traditional and English on the hoppy side of things actually, although I do think there is maybe a little, I've got a feeling there is maybe an American hop in here as well, just from the way the floral notes come out. It's not the floral notes are just a little bit more kind of punchy almost than you would expect from an English hop. But yeah, on that front third of your palate then, that's where you get that lovely big oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So if you go to that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, that's where you get a nice, you do get a nice little bit of an almost kind of cakey note out of this beer. I always talk about, you know, the well-fired, the bit of the brownie on the edge that's kind of stuck to the bacon tray. It's a little bit like that. But yeah, the fruity notes in this beer, as we kind of picked up in the aroma, are very big and very oily. So when you take this beer in, you do get a lovely bit of a kind of cherry note out of it. Yeah, there's a lovely big kind of cherry element to this one. It does have a wee bit of a kind of plummy note to it as well, but it actually strangely enough has a little bit of a very slightly kind of phenolic edge to it. And the thing as well, underneath the fruity part of the beer, you do get a little bit of that well-fired bread crusty sort of thing, which is really interesting. So yeah, a good little bit of a well-fired bread crusty base underneath the fruity side of this beer. But yeah, the back of that front third of your tongue, definitely some big plummy notes, a little bit of a kind of cherry note there, maybe a little bit of raisiny sharpness in the beginning, but as you move further forward on that front third of your palate, there's a little bit of a figgy note, but you can get some of the toasty bread crusty elements there, and then on the front tip of the tongue almost, it's very oily, and you get a wee, and it's more blackberry-ish. You get a lot of blackberries out of this beer the further that you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, the further that you progress into the aftertaste with this beer, overall the whole thing does get a little bit drier, which I think is quite interesting. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer, I think, goes together really nicely, and it adds just a little bit of contrast to it, because the beer itself, it does dry out in the malt base, and you've got a good little bit of bitterness from the hoppy side of it too. But it's a really nicely executed Imperial Stout, this, and quite old school in a sense. So big thumbs up to the guys at Newbarns Brewery for this. Awesome stuff. But I think, in fairness, we have covered the flavour profile of this one quite extensively now. So let's look at the mouthfeel. Overall, I think this beer is absolutely full-bodied. It's kind of in the middle of the full-bodied end of the spectrum, if you like. The carbonation is very smooth, and it's got a slight oiliness to it, but at the same time it's very slick. It's quite well balanced in that sense. It is quite a slick, but still quite oily and full-bodied Imperial Stout, if that makes sense. In terms of bitterness, it's a bit hard to place, to be honest with you. I don't find this beer overly bitter. It's not madly bitter, but I think it's about 60 IBUs, something like that. Remember though, this is the weakest point of my beer reviewing, is the IBU counts. I'm quite known to get this a little bit off. Either I get it spot on or I get it completely wrong. But I want to say this beer maybe has about a 60 IBU count. As it gets drier into the aftertaste, you get more bitterness out of this beer. But the malt base, like I said, it's got a little bit of dryness that evolves out of it, lovely smoothness and a good little touch of sweetness in there as well. And then the fruits are nice and big and oily, and I think that adds a good contrast to the beer. But overall, this is a lovely, lovely take on a very kind of old school Imperial Stout. I think this is just really nicely executed, and this is probably the standout beer that I've had from Newbarns Brewery so far. But that's not to say that I don't enjoy their more sessionable things. Those are really nicely executed, but in terms of just a beer that's going to strike you and you're going to remember, I think this one really does it well. But I'd love to see these guys do a few more kind of higher alcohol things, you know, like an old school West Coast IPA could be interesting, a Doppelbock, a Belgian quadruple, but a Scotch ale. They're a Scottish brewery, they've got to try, you know, a 180 shilling. I would love to have a go at one of those beers. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. I'm really looking forward to seeing what these guys have in store for us in the future. But this is a lovely big Imperial Stout. This one at 11%, it's stupidly drinkable as well. You do get a wee bit of alcohol warmth out of this one, but it does cover its alcohol very, very well. But yeah, let's leave it there. This one was the plain dark beer, an 11% Imperial Stout, or a strong export stout, as these guys are calling it, from Newbarns. This one comes to you from Newbarns Brewery in Leith through in Edinburgh, and these guys are a brewery that you definitely need to check out. A very welcome and very nice addition to the Scottish beer scene, and I certainly look forward to seeing what else these guys are going to produce over the next while. Fingers crossed we can do a Meet the Brewery segment. I would love to do that with these guys, and an out and about video at the brewery could be very interesting too. But yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Newbarns Brewery. We will return to these guys the next time I'm home in Scotland, probably in September or so, but I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope you've been enjoying this Scottish and English series of beer reviews. Until the next time, slán you just now, and I'll catch you guys later. Slán you, skål, cheers, and catch you guys in the next review. The plain dark beer, 11% Imperial Stout, strong export stout as they're calling it, from Newbarns Brewery through in Leith in Edinburgh. Catch you guys on the next one. Slán you.